Captain Elias walked carefully through the thick alien forest, his boots crunching softly against the strange ground. The trees rose tall and twisted above him, their glowing leaves giving the entire place a faint green light. He had traveled to many worlds during his years as an explorer, but this one felt different. It was quiet, too quiet. Not even the usual hum of insects or the cry of alien birds reached his ears. Only the wind moved, carrying a strange tension in the air. He checked the scanner on his wrist. No life signs nearby, the device reported in its calm, mechanical voice. Still, Elias did not trust it. Machines could be fooled. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts more than the blinking lights of technology. His mission was simple: chart this unclaimed planet, map its resources, and see if it was safe for human settlement. Yet from the moment he landed, something about this place warned him that danger hid just out of sight. The shadows between the trees seemed too deep and the silence pressed against his ears. Then suddenly a sound broke the silence. Help. The cry was faint, almost swallowed by the forest, but Elias froze. His heart beat faster. That was a human voice. Impossible, he thought. No one else was supposed to be here. He raised his head, listening again. Help, please! This time it was louder, filled with panic and desperation. Without wasting another moment, Elias sprinted toward the sound. Branches whipped against his arms as he pushed through the dense growth. His training told him to be cautious, to keep his weapon ready, but his heart told him there was no time to waste. Someone was in danger. He broke into a small clearing and stopped suddenly. There, caught in the center of the open ground, was a young woman. She was trapped inside a glowing cage of blue light that crackled and hissed around her like lightning. The energy wrapped tightly around her, keeping her suspended just above the ground. Her hands reached out desperately through the barrier, her eyes wide with fear. Please help me, she cried again when she saw him. Elias quickly scanned the device. It was not natural, no plant, no accident. This was a trap. The energy field was too precise, too cruel. His stomach twisted as realization struck. Alien hunters. He had heard rumors about them. Tall creatures from the far side of the galaxy who did not hunt for food, but for sport. They were said to capture their prey in strange devices, testing them, studying them before moving in for the kill. Elias had always thought it was just another spacer's tale, a story told to frighten rookies, but now the evidence stood right in front of him. The woman's face was pale, her lips trembling as the energy sparked against her skin. She looked exhausted, as if she had been trapped there for hours, maybe even days. Elias forced himself to stay calm. Panic would not help either of them. Hold on, he said firmly. I'll get you out of there. He approached carefully, examining the trap. It pulsed with alien energy, connected to strange metallic spikes half buried in the ground. His scanner beeped a warning. Unstable energy, dangerous to touch. The woman shook her head weakly. Don't. It's too dangerous. They'll come back. I'm not leaving you here, Elias replied. His voice was steady, though his mind raced. If hunters had set this, then they could be nearby watching. Every second counted. He knelt near the spikes and studied their design. Alien symbols glowed faintly on the metal. It was unlike any technology he had seen before. But he noticed one detail. Each spike hummed at a slightly different frequency. If the energy was a net, then breaking one part of it might collapse the whole thing. Taking a deep breath, Elias pulled a small multi-tool from his belt. It wasn't much against alien technology, but it was all he had. He adjusted the settings, tuned it to the closest frequency, and pressed it against one of the spikes. Sparks exploded and the ground shook violently. The woman gasped as the energy field flared brighter, searing the air with heat. Please hurry, she begged. Elias gritted his teeth, fighting the heat and noise. Almost there, he muttered. With a final twist, the spike cracked and went dark. Instantly, the glowing cage collapsed. The woman fell forward, hitting the ground hard but free. She looked up at Elias, tears in her eyes. You saved me. Elias extended his hand and helped her to her feet. She was lighter than he expected, her body thin from exhaustion. Her clothes were torn, marked with burns from the trap. Yet there was determination in her eyes, a strength that shone through her fear. My name's Elias, he said. Who are you? Lyra, she whispered. I was running. They caught me. Who? Elias asked, though he already knew the answer. The hunters, she said with a trembling voice. They'll be back. We have to leave now. Elias scanned the forest again. The silence had returned, but now it felt heavier, as if eyes were watching from the shadows. His instincts screamed that Lyra was right. They were not safe here. He placed his hand on her shoulder gently. "Stay close to me. We'll get out of this." But as they started moving, Elias realized something troubling. His mission was no longer about charting a planet. It was now about survival, and not just his own. Lyra clung to him, refusing to let go. Every step they took together bound their fates tighter. And somewhere in the forest, the hunters who had set the trap were surely aware their prey had been freed. The game had just begun. The alien forest was alive with whispers. Each gust of wind carried strange rustling sounds as if unseen creatures moved just beyond sight. The tall glowing trees bent slightly, their luminous leaves casting long shadows across the ground. Captain Elias kept his hand on his weapon while guiding Lyra through the thick undergrowth. Every step reminded him of the danger. The hunters might return at any moment. He glanced behind them often, half expecting to see a massive cloaked figure emerge from the shadows. But there was nothing, only silence and the faint crackle of energy still clinging to Lyra's clothes. Lyra walked close beside him, her hand gripping his sleeve tightly. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the forest. She was clearly frightened, yet she also moved with a strange awareness, as though she knew the dangers of this place better than he did. "We shouldn't stay in the open," she whispered. "They always watch from the high ground. If we keep moving under the trees, it'll be harder for them to see us." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You sound like you've been here before." Lyra did not answer immediately. She looked away, her lips pressed tightly together. "I've been running for a long time," she finally said. "I've learned how they think. They never stop. Once they set their eyes on someone, they follow until the hunt is over." Her words made Elias's chest tighten. He had heard stories about these alien hunters, but hearing it from someone who had lived through it gave the fear a sharper edge. Still, he forced his voice to remain steady. "Then we'll keep ahead of them. Humans are good at surviving. They won't take us easily." Lyra gave a faint nod, but her hand stayed firmly on his arm, as if letting go would mean losing her only shield. Signs of the hunters, the two moved deeper into the forest. The air grew thicker, carrying a faint metallic scent that Elias did not like. The ground was soft with moss, yet here and there he noticed blackened patches, as if the earth had been burned. At one such patch he knelt down to examine it. The soil was melted into glassy chunks. Whatever caused it had released intense heat in a single strike. Plasma weapon, he thought grimly. Too advanced for anything natural here. Lyra crouched beside him. "This is where they mark the ground. They do it to scare their prey, to remind them they are being watched." Elias frowned. "You're saying they do this on purpose?" "Yes," she whispered. "They want fear. Fear makes prey make mistakes." The thought unsettled him. These hunters were not like wild predators. They had intelligence, patience, and cruelty. They enjoyed the chase. Suddenly, Lyra touched his arm and pointed to a tree nearby. Long, deep claw marks cut through the bark, glowing faintly as if burned in with heat. Elias rose slowly, his eyes scanning the area. "They're close," she said softly. Elias tightened his grip on his weapon. "Then we'll be ready for them." A shelter in the roots as night began to fall. The glowing forest dimmed, the light fading into a soft, ghostly glow. Strange calls echoed in the distance, animal-like yet unfamiliar. Elias knew they needed shelter before the hunters or something else found them. They came across a massive tree with roots so large that they formed a hollow space underneath. Elias checked it carefully, then motioned for Lyra to crawl inside. It was not perfect, but it would give them cover and hide their heat signatures from above. Inside the hollow, the air was damp but safe. Lyra sat against the curved roots, pulling her knees close to her chest. Elias sat nearby, watching the small scanner on his wrist. It flickered uncertainly, picking up faint signals but nothing clear. Lyra broke the silence. "Why did you help me?" Elias glanced at her. "Because you needed it." "No," she said quietly, shaking her head. "Most people would have run. When the hunters set traps, it's dangerous to go near them. You risked yourself for me." Elias thought about it for a moment. "I couldn't walk away. Leaving someone behind? That's not who I am." Lyra's eyes softened. "Then you're different. Most people only think about survival, but you think about others." Elias shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. He was not used to being studied like that. You said you were running. From where? A colony? Her expression darkened. Yes, my colony was attacked. The hunters came without warning. They destroyed our defenses, then began collecting people. I escaped before they caught me, but... Her voice trailed off, her shoulders trembling. Elias waited quietly, not pushing her to continue. After a long silence, she whispered, I thought I was safe. But they followed me here. They never let go once they choose prey. Elias clenched his fists. The idea of an entire colony being hunted like animals filled him with anger. Then we'll stop them, he said firmly. One way or another. Lyra looked at him with a mixture of hope and doubt. Do you really believe that? Yes, Elias said, his voice steady. Humans don't give up. We fight back. That's what makes us different. For the first time since he met her, Lyra gave a small smile. It was faint, but it reached her tired eyes, the watching eyes. The forest remained silent through the night, but Elias could not sleep. He stayed awake, listening, his weapon across his knees. Several times he thought he saw movement outside the hollow, shadows shifting, branches swaying without wind. His scanner beeped faintly, then went blank, as if something powerful was interfering with it. At one point, he crawled forward to peek outside. The forest was empty, but his instincts screamed that something was out there. He saw no hunters, but he felt their presence. They were watching, studying, waiting. Behind him, Lyra stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly. She clutched the fabric of his sleeve even as she dreamed, unwilling to let go. Elias sighed quietly, promising himself he would not fail her. When dawn finally arrived, the forest glowed again with gentle light. Lyra woke looking a little stronger. They left their shelter and moved onward, though both carried the weight of unseen eyes following them. The warning as they crossed a small stream, Elias noticed something unusual. Sticking out of the water was a piece of metal shaped like a spearhead. He waded closer and pulled it free. It was long, sharp, and etched with alien markings. Lyra's face turned pale. That's theirs. They leave those behind when they want their prey to know the hunt has begun. Elias studied the weapon. It was far too advanced to be just a spear. It glowed faintly with energy, humming in his hands. It was not left behind by accident. It was a message. He dropped it back into the stream and turned to Lyra. Then it means they've marked us. Lyra nodded slowly, fear flickering in her eyes. Yes, they've chosen you now. Elias stood tall, his jaw set. Good, then let them come. If they want to hunt, they'll find out humans are not easy prey. Lyra looked at him with both fear and admiration. She stayed close by his side, refusing to let him face it alone. The forest around them seemed to grow darker, as though the hunters themselves had become part of the shadows. Every step forward felt heavier, but Elias knew there was no turning back. The hunters were coming. The hunt had begun. The days passed slowly as Elias and Lyra moved deeper into the alien wilderness. The forest stretched endlessly, filled with twisted trees that glowed faintly at night and creatures that kept their distance but watched with glowing eyes. Each day was a test of survival, finding water, making shelter, and staying one step ahead of the hunters. Elias's training as an explorer had prepared him for dangerous environments, but never for being hunted. Yet Lyra's presence changed everything. She stayed close, always watching the shadows, warning him of signs he might have missed. She had a sharp instinct for danger, as if she could sense the hunters before they appeared. Sometimes, Elias wondered how much she truly knew. Shared survival on the third night. They made camp beside a small pool of clear water. Elias lit a small shielded fire, just enough to keep the damp cold away. He handed Lyra a ration bar from his pack. She accepted it gratefully but hesitated before eating. You're giving me your food again, she said softly. You need it more than I do. Elias replied. Lyra shook her head. If you starve, I won't survive either. Elias gave a small smile. Don't worry about me. I've gone without food before. You need your strength. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the distant sounds of alien night creatures. Lyra finally took a bite, chewing slowly, her eyes glistening with gratitude. You're different, she said quietly. Most people I knew in the colony only thought about themselves when things got bad. But you keep thinking about me. Elias looked into the fire. Maybe that's because I know what it feels like to be left behind. Lyra tilted her head, curious. Left behind? Elias nodded slowly. Years ago, during a mission, my team was attacked. I got separated. When the ship pulled out, they didn't wait for me. I had to survive alone for weeks before I was rescued. Her eyes softened. That must have been terrible. It was, Elias admitted. But it taught me something important. No one should be abandoned. Not if I can help it. Lyra's hand touched his sleeve gently. That's why I can't let go of you. You're the first person who made me feel safe in a long time. Signs of the Hunters. The next morning they woke to a chilling discovery. Near their camp, 3 symbols had been carved into the bark of a glowing tree. The markings burned faintly, giving off heat. Elias touched the grooves carefully. They were fresh. Lyra's face turned pale. It's their sign. They're telling us they're close. Elias studied the marks with a frown. Then they're playing with us. They want us to know. Lyra nodded, her voice trembling. They always do. The Hunters enjoy the fear. They want us to run so they can chase. Elias's jaw tightened. Then we won't give them what they want. We'll move carefully on our terms. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. You're not afraid? Oh, I'm afraid, Elias admitted honestly. But fear doesn't control me. It sharpens me. For the first time. Lyra allowed herself a faint smile. Questions without answers. Later, as they rested near a stream, Elias decided it was time to ask something that had been troubling him. Lyra, he said carefully, you know a lot about these Hunters. More than anyone I've ever met. How? Lyra stiffened. Her gaze dropped to the water where strange fish darted beneath the surface. I just learned from experience, she said slowly. Elias narrowed his eyes. Experience like what? From your colony? Her hands clenched together. For a long moment she said nothing. Then in a low voice she answered, They caught me once. Elias's chest tightened. They caught you? She nodded, her voice trembling. Not for long, but long enough. They don't kill right away. Sometimes they keep their prey. They study them. Watch them. Set traps with them. Her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. I escaped. I don't know how, but I did. Since then, they've never stopped following me. Elias felt a rush of anger, not at her, but at the Hunters who had treated her like nothing more than prey. He wanted to say something to comfort her, but words felt too small. Instead, he placed a firm hand on her shoulder. They won't take you again, he said with quiet strength. Not while I'm here. Lyra looked at him, her eyes shining with both fear and relief. She nodded, clinging to his words as though they were a shield. The growing bond, the days that followed, forged a bond between them that neither had expected. They learned to rely on each other completely. Elias taught Lyra how to use his spare scanner, how to identify safe plants and water sources. Lyra, in turn, taught him signs of the Hunters, how their cloaking disturbed the air, how their footsteps pressed differently into the soil, how they marked trails with strange symbols. Each night, when they found a safe place to rest, Lyra would settle close to Elias. At first, he thought it was only fear that kept her near, but over time he realized it was more than that. She trusted him, and trust in such a deadly place was rare and precious. One evening, while they sat in silence beneath the roots of another massive tree, Lyra whispered, When I was trapped in that cage, I thought it was over. I thought no one would ever come. Then you appeared. You were like hope. Elias looked at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice. You shouldn't depend on me too much, he said gently. I'm only human. That's why I depend on you, she replied. Because you're human. And humans fight for each other. Her words struck him deeply. He had always seen humanity's flaws, the greed, the fear, the mistakes. But in Lyra's voice he heard something else. The belief that humanity had something worth protecting. The storm on the 5th night. A storm rolled across the forest. The sky glowed with strange lightning that split the air in brilliant colors. Rain poured heavily, soaking the ground. Elias and Lyra took shelter beneath a rocky ledge, their clothes dripping wet. The storm drowned out every other sound, making it impossible to hear approaching footsteps. Elias kept his weapon close, his eyes scanning the curtain of rain. Lyra shivered beside him, pressing close to his side for warmth. They could be out there right now, she whispered. They could, Elias admitted. But storms like this give us cover too. They won't find us easily. Lyra rested her head lightly against his shoulder. I feel safe when I'm with you. Elias didn't answer at once. He felt the weight of her words. In this alien wilderness surrounded by danger, they had found something rare. Trust, maybe even something deeper. The silent stalker. When the storm ended, the air smelled fresh and clean, but Elias's instincts screamed of danger. As they prepared to move, he noticed something strange. A single footprint in the mud near their shelter. It was larger than any human's, with claws at the tips. Lyra saw it too. Her face turned pale. They were here, Elias nodded grimly. And they're still watching. The bond they had built in those days gave him strength. He no longer felt like a lone explorer. He had someone to protect, someone who depended on him, and someone he depended on in return. As they walked away from the storm's aftermath, Elias knew the truth. The hunters weren't just after Lyra anymore. They were after him, and he was ready. The air was colder than usual that morning. Mist curled around the roots of the glowing trees, and every sound seemed sharper. The drip of water, the rustle of leaves, the distant echo of something moving. Elias tightened his jacket and glanced at Lyra. Her face was pale, her eyes scanning the forest with tense focus. "They're here," she said quietly. Elias nodded. He had felt it too, the pressure of unseen eyes tracking them. For days they had stayed ahead of the hunters. Now they were closing the gap. The forest ahead grew darker. The trees bent low as though warning them to turn back. Elias stepped forward, careful and silent, with Lyra close at his side. She carried no weapon, but Elias knew her presence was no weakness. She had taught him much about surviving in these woods. They moved cautiously, crossing mossy ground and stepping over strange, glowing fungi. Every step was calculated. Neither spoke. They knew sound could give away their position. The first contact, suddenly the forest fell silent. Not just quiet, deep silence, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Elias raised his hand, signaling Lyra to stop. His scanner flickered violently, then died. From the shadows, movement appeared. Slow, deliberate. The hunters had arrived. They emerged in pairs at first, tall, cloaked figures with shining armor and weapons that hummed softly. Their bodies were covered in strange patterns, and their faces were hidden. They moved without sound, as if they were part of the forest itself. Elias felt a chill run through him. Lyra whispered, "They want us to run." Elias tightened his grip on his weapon. "Then we'll make them work for it." The hunters did not attack immediately. They circled them, their movements careful and precise, watching, calculating. Elias noticed something strange. The hunters were not just seeking to kill. They were testing them, studying them. This was not a simple hunt. "They're playing with us," Lyra said. "They always do," Elias nodded. "Then we'll give them a game they won't forget." Traps and counter-traps. Elias led Lyra deeper into the forest, toward a narrow canyon he had spotted earlier. He needed a plan. They could not outrun the hunters forever. They had to fight back. Inside the canyon, Elias began setting traps using the materials around him. Broken branches, vines, rocks, and energy sensors scavenged from his own pack. He worked quickly, instructing Lyra to help where she could. Together they crafted barriers and tripwires designed to confuse and slow their pursuers. Lyra watched him work with a mixture of fear and admiration. "You're turning this into a real trap," she said quietly. "Better to be ready than to be caught," Elias replied. By nightfall, the canyon was ready. It was a web of obstacles, each designed to slow and confuse. Elias knew the hunters would not come directly. They would study the terrain, look for weaknesses. But he hoped to make them underestimate humans again. They rested for a few hours, hiding in a sheltered crevice. Elias watched the canyon entrance carefully. Lyra sat beside him, exhausted but alert. "They'll come for us," she said softly. "They will," Elias answered, "but we'll be waiting." The battle around midnight, the hunters arrived. They stepped into the canyon as silently as shadows, moving in patterns that spoke of careful strategy. Elias and Lyra waited in silence. The first hunter stepped forward, and Elias triggered the first trap, a net of energy vines that rose suddenly from the canyon floor, tangling the hunter. The air erupted with light as the hunter struggled, cutting the vines with a sharp blade. Others moved forward quickly, scanning the canyon for threats. Elias and Lyra struck. They moved together like a single unit. Elias fired his weapon with precise aim, each shot forcing the hunters to scatter. Lyra hurled modified traps, devices she had learned to create from scavenged materials, causing bursts of light and noise that confused the hunters further. The hunters adapted quickly. They were not wild animals. They were experienced, intelligent, and deadly. They began working as a team, cutting off escape routes, forcing Elias and Lyra deeper into the canyon. Lyra shouted, "They're learning too fast. We can't hold them forever." Elias nodded, firing another shot. "Then we don't hold them. We end this." The truth revealed as they fought. Lyra shouted over the noise, "There's something you need to know. They didn't just trap me by accident." Elias paused for a moment, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" "They marked me," she said fiercely. "I wasn't just a target. I was bait. They were testing me, to see how strong I was, and now they want you too." Elias's breath tightened. That explained so much, the persistence of the hunters, the traps, their silent stalking. They weren't hunting randomly. They had chosen him because he had saved her. The thought filled him with both dread and resolve. "Then we end this hunt tonight," he said firmly. Lyra looked at him, eyes wide. "Do you really think we can?" "We have to try," Elias replied. "We're human. That means we fight until the end." The final move, the canyon became a battlefield. Hunters fell into traps, others closed in, testing their endurance. Elias and Lyra moved with growing confidence, each action bringing them closer together. They were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting for freedom. Elias led them toward the heart of the canyon where the terrain rose sharply. The hunters followed, their movements precise. Elias knew this was their moment. He whispered to Lyra, "When I give the signal, we take them all down." Lyra nodded. She trusted him completely. At his signal, they sprang their final trap, a massive collapse of energy barriers and falling rocks. The canyon roared as hunters were caught in the explosion of light and sound. Elias and Lyra darted forward, striking when the hunters were disoriented. The battle was fierce. The hunters adapted, but Elias's strategy worked. One by one, they were forced to retreat, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. Breathing heavily, Elias looked at Lyra. She was bruised, tired, but still standing. "They're gone," she said quietly. "For now," Elias replied. "But they'll be back." Lyra nodded, leaning slightly against him for support. "Then we need to be ready." A new understanding. After the battle, they found shelter in the canyon's heart. Elias cleaned his wounds, while Lyra examined the hunters' weapons they had taken as trophies. Her eyes were thoughtful, almost distant. "You know something," Elias said softly. "You're not telling me everything." Lyra shook her head. "Not yet. But I will, when I know it's safe," Elias understood. Trust had been built between them, but secrets still lingered. The forest was quiet now, the danger temporarily gone, yet both knew it was only a matter of time before the hunters returned. Elias looked at Lyra and spoke with quiet resolve. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." She nodded. Together. The hunters had tested them, and for the first time Elias knew they had passed. But the real challenge was yet to come. The hunt had begun. The forest was quieter now. The air felt heavier, as if it knew what was coming. Elias and Lyra sat together in the hollow they had made their shelter, resting from the battle in the canyon. Both were bruised and tired, but neither spoke much. Words felt too small for what they had endured. Elias looked at Lyra. Her face was marked by fatigue, but her eyes still burned with determination. They had survived the hunters' first attack, but they both knew it was far from over. Somewhere out there, the hunters were regrouping. "They'll come back stronger," Lyra said quietly. "They always do." Elias nodded. "Then we need a plan. And this time, we finish it." She looked at him sharply. "Finish it?" "Yes," Elias said firmly. "We can't run forever. We need to make sure they never hunt humans again." Lyra studied him for a long moment, then she nodded. "I'll trust you." The hunters' true purpose. Over the next day, they moved carefully deeper into the forest. Lyra led Elias to a place she called the heart of the hunt, a wide clearing hidden deep in the trees. There, she said, was the source of the hunters' power. "They have a device there," she explained. "It is their control. If we destroy it, they lose their advantage. We can end the hunt." Elias frowned. Why would they keep such a thing here? Why not on their ships? Lyra looked down. because it is more than just a weapon. It is a part of them. Their strength comes from it. Without it, they cannot hunt us the way they do. The thought chilled Elias. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a war for humanity itself. He placed his hand on Lyra's shoulder. Then we go there. Together. She gave a small, resolute nod. Into the heart of danger, the journey to the heart of the hunt was perilous. The forest grew darker, denser, and more alien. Strange creatures prowled nearby, and every step felt watched. Elias and Lyra moved in silence, trusting only their instincts and each other. At last, they reached the clearing. Before them stood a massive structure, unlike anything Elias had seen. It was built of black crystal and metal, glowing faintly with energy. Strange symbols pulsed across its surface, and the air hummed with power. "This is it," Lyra whispered. "The heart of the hunt." Elias looked at it carefully. His weapon scanners detected powerful energy fields. The hunters would not let them approach easily. They would defend this place with everything they had. Lyra placed her hand over his. "We have to try. For all humans." Elias nodded. "For humanity." They stepped forward into the clearing. The final battle no sooner had they approached than the hunters appeared. Not one or two. Dozens of them. Cloaked and armed, they moved silently out of the forest shadows, surrounding Elias and Lyra. Their glowing eyes locked onto their prey. Elias raised his weapon, his body tense. Lyra moved beside him, her hands gripping a strange device she had carried with her. It pulsed softly with energy. The hunters advanced slowly. Elias could feel their intent, not just to kill, but to test them, to see if humans were worthy prey. Lyra looked at Elias. "This ends now." He nodded. Together they charged forward. The clearing erupted into chaos. Energy blasts lit the night. The ground shook from the hunters' weapons, and the air rang with shouts and roars. Elias fought with precision, aiming for the hunters' weapons and disabling them. Lyra moved, with swift, focused movements, using her device to interfere with the hunters' energy cloaks. But the hunters adapted. They attacked in perfect coordination, forcing Elias and Lyra to retreat toward the heart of the hunt. They knew this was their last chance. The choice of humanity. Reaching the heart of the hunt, Elias looked around. The glowing structure pulsed stronger now, reacting to the battle. He understood instantly. Destroying it would stop the hunters, but it could cost their lives. Lyra looked at him, her breath heavy. "We can't let them keep hunting us. We have to destroy it." Elias nodded. "I know. But we need to be smart. This isn't just about fighting. It's about sacrifice." Lyra placed her hand over his. "Whatever it takes." They moved together to the base of the structure. Elias began planting charges while Lyra worked with her device to disrupt the energy shield. The hunters closed in, their roars filling the air. "Now!" Elias shouted. Lyra activated her device. The shield around the heart of the hunt flickered and cracked. Elias detonated the charges. The ground exploded in a wave of energy. Light blinded them both. The hunters screamed, their forms thrown back by the blast. The heart of the hunt cracked and shattered, sending a shockwave through the forest. The hunters fell silent. One by one, they vanished into the shadows, defeated, not destroyed, but broken in their will to hunt. Elias fell to his knees, breathing heavily. Lyra collapsed beside him, exhausted. They had won. A new beginning. When the dust settled, the forest was quiet again. The heart of the hunt lay in ruins. The strange glow in the trees had dimmed. The hunters had gone. Lyra looked at Elias, her voice soft. "It's over." "For now," Elias said. He stood, helping her to her feet. "But they will remember this." She nodded, her eyes full of gratitude. "So will we." They stood together in the clearing, looking at the destroyed structure. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were right. This wasn't just survival, it was more. It was a choice. Humanity chooses to fight, to protect, to stand together." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then we made the right choice. Elias looked up at the glowing forest. Somewhere beyond the trees, the sky was turning to dawn. They had survived. They had fought. And humanity had shown its strength. Lyra took his hand. "We should go home." Elias nodded. "Yes, and we tell the world. They must know they are not safe, but neither are we weak." They walked away from the heart of the hunt together, leaving the forest behind. The hunters had tested them. Humanity had answered, and humanity had won.